Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules YouTube channel. Today is our Geelong Cats 2024 review. Their season finished just a couple days ago against the Brisbane Lions in the preliminary final. We're going to be reviewing their season, how they went, what went right, what went wrong, what we can expect for the Cats in the coming years. As always, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. We're going through every club as they get eliminated. There's only 4 clubs left to do the reviews for. This is our 4th last. We've got Port Adelaide coming live tomorrow. And then it's just the 2 grand finalists, Sydney and Brisbane, to go. So check out all that content. It's all up on, either up or coming up on the YouTube channel. There's also 2 podcasts that go live on Spotify and YouTube each week. One on the AFLW and one on the AFL men's competition. So check that out as well. Plenty of socials at All Aussie Rules everywhere. So go check it all out. Without any further ado, let's jump into the Geelong Cats 2024. They ended up with 15 wins, 8 losses, finished 3rd on the ladder through the regular season. As we mentioned just then, they fell in the preliminary final to Brisbane. So they finished technically 4th on the ladder, with Port Adelaide also falling in the same week, technically finishing 3rd. So it's a pretty good year, a pretty good result. Like they're in the top 4 teams out of 18. So it's not a terrible season. Probably a disappointing finish for them. There's no doubt about that, but not a complete fail. We'll jump now into game by game for the Geelong Cats this year. Their season, as you can see, started really well. Lots of green up the top. They then hit a bit of a rough patch heading into the bye. They turned it around in the second half of the year. And as I said, managed to finish 3rd in the regular season. So game by game, they started with Geelong. They are Geelong. Down in Geelong against St Kilda. Really close fought contest. They only won by 8 points. St Kilda gave them a really good run that day, but they got the job done. Week 2, they went and played Adelaide in Adelaide and got the win in a weird sort of game. Hawthorn, they beat by 36 points. They dominated 2 quarters. Hawthorn played really well in the other 2. They then beat Bulldogs in Gather Round in one of the games of the year. It was a cracker. They won it by 4 points. They then beat North Melbourne comfortably down at the Cattery by 75 points. Went up to the Gabba and beat Brisbane in a weird, wet game that Brisbane kicked horribly in front of goal. Geelong got the win by 26. They beat Carlton by 13 at the MCG in another game where their opposition wasted chances. And then they hit a bit of a form slump. Melbourne got them at the MCG by 8 points. They then got done by Port Adelaide down at the Cattery by 6 points. Went up to the Gold Coast and got pumped by 64 points in a high-scoring game against Gold Coast. Then Giants went down to the Cattery and also beat them by 4 points. So they'd lost 4 games in a row, 3 of them in Melbourne, 2 of them at the Cattery. And it was like, oh, maybe they're not as good as we first might have thought after 7 weeks. They then bounced back with a 30-point win over Richmond at the Cattery before heading up to the SCG and getting beaten by the Sydney Swans, who had only 1 loss at that point and were looking like the best team. They might still be looking like the best team, obviously, going into the grand final this week. So they lost that by 30 points. Going to the bye, pretty solid spot. Could have been better. After being 7-0, you probably would have liked a couple more wins. But still, a pretty solid spot. They lost to Carlton out of the bye. Got absolutely thrashed. I remember sitting watching this game thinking, Geelong just are done for the year, and I was like, Carlton are going to fly home. And then from that point on, the team's just pretty much reversed form. Geelong picked up straight away the next week, and Carlton fell apart very quickly. So they followed it up round 16, played at the MCG against the Bombers and won that by 45 points in what was a cracking performance. They then went to the Cattery and played Hawthorn, got the win again, this time by 51 points. Played Collingwood at the MCG and got the win by 20 points. Then hosted the Bulldogs down at the Cattery, lost by 47 points before hitting their form again, beating North Melbourne by 40, only just getting over the line at the Cattery against Adelaide by 5 points. Went over to the West and Optus Stadium for Fremantle and beat them by 11 points, which sealed them a final spot and also almost guaranteed them top 4. In the end, they lost the next week to St Kilda by 18 points, but that didn't cost them in the end because the final round was back down in Geelong, playing against West Coast, and they won it by 93 points in an absolute shellacking to finish third on the ladder. Week 1 of the finals, they had to go to Adelaide to play Port Adelaide, who finished second on the ladder, and absolutely demolished them. That second half was absolutely scintillating football by them, and Port Adelaide were really, really bad that day. They won it by 84 points, put them through to a prelim final against the Brisbane Lions at the MCG. They were 4 or so goals up, looking like maybe another grand final against Sydney's coming their way. But Brisbane just didn't go away. They kept coming. They fought hard. In the end, the Brisbane Lions were too good for them at the MCG. A little bit surprised in a way with how well Geelong played in the qualifying final. But at the end of the day, they fall short. They don't make the grand final. Finish out in a prelim. They've had a lot of success over recent years, so it's not like it's the end of the world, but not the best result in the end. We look at their last 3 years, 22, 23, 24. Obviously, we'll start at 22. They won the premiership that year. They went 18-4, finished top of the ladder, dominated the season. Really good year. 2023 wasn't great in terms of win-loss record, 10 wins, 12 losses and a draw. Coming off the premiership, it's not the end of the world. They finished 12th on the ladder, but, you look at their points for and against, they certainly had their opportunities. They played pretty good football through most of the year, just didn't quite get the job done in the end and finished 12th. Then this year, they bounced back. They got 15 wins, 8 losses, finished third on the ladder, pretty good season. If we look at their age and experience over the last 3 years, slowly coming down. They're now the second oldest and second most experienced team this year. Obviously, the retirements of Joel Selwood and Isaac Smith, among others, over the last couple years, has certainly lowered that. Probably going to drop again going into next year with Tom Hawkins retiring. So they're still going to be one of the older teams, but certainly not as old as they are this year. Their experience has dropped more than their age, in my opinion. I've had a lot of players come in that are middle-aged, that sounds weird, like 25 to 27-year-olds. It's what they kind of do. And that lowers the experience, but not the age. But they're in a really good spot still. They've still got plenty of talent. I would be surprised to see them drop out of the 8 next season. I look at some of their stats. We're not going to look at all of this because there's a lot of information on this screen right now. But we'll highlight some of the key points, I guess. We'll start at the top because where better to start? Point differential. Look at that 2022 record. Plus 32.5 points per game. 99 points for, 66 against. Offensively, they've stayed pretty well over the last... pretty well even across the last 3 years. 90.8 and then this year 95.1. So offensively, still scoring pretty well. One of the better scoring teams in the AFL, but the defensively is where the issue is starting to mount up, I guess. Getting worse and worse each year. 66.4 in 22, up to 80.7 in 2023, and up to 82.7 in 2024. So defensively, maybe getting a little bit worse in total points at least against. So that might be an area that they need to maybe look at over the off season. How they can get their defense back to maybe not to 66.4 points like they were in 2022 because that's absurd, but back into at least the 70s would be an ideal situation for them. Disposals, very similar last year to this year. They're never really a massive team in terms of winning disposals compared to their opposition, but certainly lower than what it was in 2022. Field position, surprisingly, this year was a lot lower in terms of inside 50s compared to last year, which is surprising because they won an extra 5 games this year, but well below what they did in 2022. Their rebound percentage was rebound 50 percentage, slightly above the AFL average this year at 75.3. So they were pretty good in that area. Meters gained surprisingly went up massively this year, but so did meters gained for the opposition. So maybe their games just sped up, more open football, and ended up just bouncing the ball end to end a lot more this year than they have in previous years. Intercept game is probably the area of their game that they were best at this year. They were outstanding. Their numbers are nowhere near as good as the 2022 season, where they were plus 6.9 intercepts per game, but plus 3.7 led the AFL this year in that stat category. They were by far the best team in the intercept game. We'll get on to scoring in a minute and have a look at how they score from intercepts and turnovers, but we'll get to that in a minute. Contested footy certainly has dropped off since 2022, as has uncontested footy, so not the end of the world, but certainly a bit of a drop-off. The one thing that's been rising is loose ball gets. Centre clearances dropped off, as has stoppage clearances. Their forward efficiency is much the same, stayed very similar. Probably the most similar output across 3 seasons in the AFL. 49.7, 49.2, 49.4. Defensively, last year defensive efficiency was a little bit of an area of concern, but they tidied that up a little bit this year. Very much basically on AFL average this year. Tackle-wise, they're not a massive tackling team. They weren't this year. They weren't even in 2022 when they dominated the AFL. So nothing too much to read into there. And yeah, ruckman. They maybe lack a ruckman, a full-time good ruckman, but it doesn't doesn't kill their game completely. It does. They get beaten in hit-outs, and technically this year they ended up down in clearances, but with how good they are at the intercept game, it hasn't hurt them too much. Maybe it cost them in the end in the finals, but hard to pinpoint it to that. Now we'll look at their scoring sources for over the last 3 years. This year from kick-ins, really good offensively and defensively. 5.64, 2.8 against. Much better in both categories compared to even 2022 when they were really good. Stoppages-wise, they've also increased their scoring from 34 in 2022 up to 39 this year. Unfortunately, also defensively has got 7 points worse off. So in net loss of 2 points per game there from stoppages. Turnovers, 2022 was outstanding. 60 points for, 34 against. They are ridiculous numbers. Nobody else is going to get them. Well, maybe eventually someone will, but certainly no one was near those numbers this year. However, their turnover numbers, for the amount of turnovers that they get compared to their opposition, to only gain 6 points on them from turnovers is probably a loss overall. You look at it from a point of view from last year to this year, they dropped 2 points offensively and dropped 1 point defensively, so a net loss of 1 point in turnover game. Not ideal when they do dominate that turnover game. Maybe just an area of working out where they're going wrong in terms of turnover and turning that into scores. Defensive half transition offensively was as good as it's been. 2022 this year, both very similar numbers. But defending against the defensive half ball, not so good, conceding an extra 10 points on 22 and even an extra 5 points on what they did in 2023. Forward half dropped off again this year offensively, but defensively improved a little bit. And from centre bounce, they were outstanding this year. 14.2 points per game. 4, which is better than anyone in the AFL. Really good number there. Conceding 11.6 is also quite a bit, which suggests that that's the best time in Geelong games, either for or against, to be scoring, is from that centre bounce. Overall net gain from last year, where they were slightly down 1.6 points per game last year, to being up by 2.5 this year. So good result there. But some good stuff, some bad stuff. I think they need to work out how they can get their turnover scoring to increase, maybe by a goal, and maybe defensively certainly not go any higher than 44.8 if they want to keep being competitive next year. Now we'll have a look at the different players for Geelong this year. So first off, we'll look at players that missed 5 or more games this year. First up, Cameron Guthrie. He missed 21, obviously hurt himself. Was it a quad from memory in the pre-season game? So a rough season for him, missed a lot of football. Jed Buse missed 20 games. Some of these are form, some of them are injuries, whatnot. But it's just everyone that is at least in consideration for playing games that missed more than 5. Toby Conway missed 20. Parfitt missed 16 this year. Lawson Humphries missed 14. Gary Rowan 13. Mullen and Manor and Tom Hawkins all 13. Mark O'Connor 12. Reece Stanley 11. Jai Clark and Shannon Neal 10 each. Paddy Dangerfield missed 9. Tanner Bruin 8. Zach Tui 7. Sam De Koning missed 6. Best players by position is up next. Sorry, you can't see everything. Let me just tidy this up. Apparently, I didn't prepare this properly, but that's okay. Bear with me. There we go. We're good. So key highest rated players by position. This is going by AFL ratings. Is what those ratings are on the screen. First up, key defenders. Sam De Koning obviously missed late in the season. Couldn't get back in the team for finals. Really good year from him. I was a little surprised. He did have a little bit of a go in the ruck there at one point. Got beaten by his brother quite convincingly in that role. But overall, pretty solid season. Jack Henry, he was good. Got injured in the prelim final, I think. I heard he wouldn't have been playing in the grand final even if they made it. But a pretty solid season from him. Jake Kolajasny was good without being outstanding. Slight improvement AFL rating-wise on last year. Jeremy Cameron as a key forward. It's weird because they don't really play a key forward most of the time. Jeremy Cameron doesn't play as a traditional tall forward. He gets around the ground a lot. He gets a lot of touches. He's a loose ball king. He kicks goals though. Finished second in the Coleman. Outstanding season from him, no doubt about it. He's an absolute freak. Week in, week out, he gets the job done, but maybe missing someone like Tom Hawkins hurt them this year. Having that key forward that's a marking contested mark winner, or at least competitive in that area, can really allow him to do his stuff a little bit better, I think. Medium defenders, Max Holmes was outstanding this year, there's no doubt about it. He had a very good year. Tom Stewart, similar to last year, he was really good early. They kind of clamped him down mid-season and got a hold of him a bit where he wasn't quite so damaging. And then he managed to turn it around late season. He kind of plays a lot of the time late in the season, not so much in finals, but late in the season where he was starting in the back line but would move into that midfield role after the bounce, or sometimes even in the bounce and then just drift back a little bit. He's very damaging with the ball. He's a great player, no doubt about it. Lawson Humphries, in his first season, was really good. Great, outstanding performance from him in his 11 games. Zach Guthrie, he showed improvement, had a really good year. Showed that he's got potential. Mitch Duncan dropped off a little bit, no doubt about it. Medium forwards, Sean Manor in his first season as well, another player that Geelong have just kind of got from nowhere. He was outstanding. His first final in the qualifying final against Port Adelaide was outstanding. Great season from him all round. Myers, fantastic season again. Last year maybe he wasn't as good or damaging as he was the previous, but this year was back to his best. Kicks amazing goals, assists like nobody else in the AFL has over the last 3 years. Fantastic player, and did his role, no doubt about it. Tyson Stengel was really good all year as well. Brad Close maybe dropped off a little bit. On to the midfielders. I think their most important player, without a doubt, is Paddy Dangerfield. Their record for and against this year, I don't have it at hand. I should have prepared it, but I dare say their win-loss ratio when he's in the team this year was much better than when he was out. He played 16 games. He was outstanding. Still got another year in him, for sure. With how good he played this year, he was really good. Parfit was really good as well. Only played the 9 games, but showed some really good stuff in those 9 games. Jack Bowles, good season from him. Tom Atkins, down a little bit on last year's form, but still pretty solid. Ollie Dempsey, the Rising Star winner, he played 3 games last year. Was, I guess, at the beginning of his career. Didn't see a lot of him last year, but this year, certainly, when you take out the people that were suspended, probably deserved the Rising Star, but maybe a couple other players that did get suspended probably would have beaten him, mainly in Harley Reid. Tanner Bruin, 17 games, did his job, was pretty solid. Zach Tui, once again, role player, did all right when he was needed. Their ruckman, Toby Conway, only played the 5 games, was serviceable in the ruck role. Certainly not outstanding, but serviceable. And Blixarves, I mean, he's not necessarily a ruckman. He does play in the ruck a bit. He's tall. He plays midfield. He plays back. He plays everywhere. I don't think he was at his best this year. He certainly was a bit quieter in terms of rating, and I think that's pretty evident when you look at his numbers across the board this year. Now, final thing to look at is the players that weren't on their list this year that were last year. First, Asava Radagialia. He got traded to Port Adelaide. Put up the exact same numbers, really, that he had for Geelong last year. Not a huge loss for them. Maybe it is, though. On paper, I don't think it's a huge loss, but when you look at the fact that they certainly have struggled to stop teams scoring this year at times, maybe an extra tall defender might have helped them. Although Radagialia went forward occasionally for Port Adelaide, so they didn't even use him as a fullback all year. And Isaac Smith retired at the end of last year after a really good career, so they're the only 2 real names that weren't on their list from last year. There was other players, but they're the only 2 that really had a massive impact on games last year. So yeah, that's Geelong Cats this year. Finished, as I said, 3rd on the ladder. Bottomed out into the prelim. Wasn't their greatest performance. They played pretty solid. They could have won it on a different day, but in the end they don't. Back to the drawing board for them. They've still got plenty of talent. That's going to go again next year. Tom Hawkins has retired, but I mean, he didn't have much effect on their games this year, in my opinion. Jump down in the comments below. Let me know where you see Geelong finishing next season, 2025. I'm going to put it out there that they finish 5th or 6th, maybe, is about where I think. But a lot will depend on how they go in the off-season and how some of these players that only have just started their careers develop over the next year. But I definitely see them as a finals contender next year, for sure. Jump in the comments. Let me know what you think down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. 74% of my viewers are not subscribed, so join in. There's plenty of content every day, almost every day. Certainly at the moment, every day. Port Adelaide video will be tomorrow. Plenty of grand final weekend coverage coming up, so check all that out as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.